What's up, everybody, and welcome to Catholic Girl on the Radio. I'm Rita Saikali, and this is the show that takes you to the early church fathers' writings and it brings them to you in modern day English. Today, my friends, we are going to go through the Gospel of St. Matthew, Matthew chapter 8, verses 23 through 27. And the Gospel of St. Matthew tells us, as Jesus got into the boat, his disciples followed him. Suddenly, a violent storm came up on the sea, so that the boat was being swamped by waves. But he was asleep. They came and woke him, saying, Lord, save us. We are perishing. He said to them, Why are you terrified, O you of little faith? Then he got up, rebuked the winds and the sea, and there was a great calm. The men were amazed and said, What sort of man is this, whom even the wind and the sea obey? The Gospel of the Lord. Praise be to you, Lord Jesus Christ. Let's say a quick prayer together. Heavenly Father, here we are. We're before you. We want to delve into your words. We want a full repentant heart, not just to acquire knowledge, but to really fall in love and to really know who you are and to have your gospel be the benchmark of our lives, the thing in which we compare if we are healthy within our soul or not. And we ask you to allow us to be there, allow us to change our lives through your words. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen. All right, my friends, today's commentary comes from St. John Chrysostom, and he always has this thing that blows my mind. Every time I read his stuff, I'm mind blown. Okay, this is what he says. He says, Jesus didn't take his disciples into the boat with him for no reason. And it wasn't just to expose them to danger without purpose. So, he didn't just say, let's go to the boat for no reason, right? He had something planned. He brought them along so that they could witness the miracle that was about to happen on the sea. Now, here's the thing. Sometimes we go through seasons of our lives and we think, oh my gosh, like, why am I here? But our God is so incredibly good that if and when He allows you to walk through these seasons of lives, it's not because He doesn't want something, right? It's not because He's just being mean about it. It's because you're about to witness a miracle. And sometimes those miracles aren't necessarily physical miracles. Sometimes they are spiritual transformations from within you. And he says, like a wise and masterful trainer, he was gradually preparing and strengthening them for endurance and spiritual maturity. He had two goals in mind. First, to train them not to panic in times of a danger, and second, to keep them humble when they were honored. Wow, what a beautiful thing. Man, really, our God is so meticulous when it comes to saving our souls. There is no higher priority for him than that. All the other things, they're easy. He could give them, it's fine. But the salvation of souls is so incredibly important. And so, what did he want to do? He want them not to panic in danger because that group of people, particularly, is going to run into so many problems down the line. They are going to have so much danger in their lives. And us too, right? He's training us in that same way. He's saying, look, I am with you. And the second thing is to keep them humble when they were honored. Just a few minutes ago, right before, they were being honored, and now they are fighting in the sea. And that whole idea is that, okay, it's that I'm invincible. I am so invincible, but I really am not. Right? And here's God, and He's trying to humble them again, saying, Look, you have to stay humbled, even when there's things that are honoring. So He continues and He says, to prevent them from becoming prideful, especially since He had sent the crowds away and kept only them close. He allowed them to be caught in a violent storm. This way, He disciplined them to endure trials with strength and patience, which is what we all need. And I hope that He teaches us that, not necessarily through these kind of trials, but nevertheless, that we do have strength and patience to continue with Him. And St. John continues and he says, through his earlier miracles were already astonishing. This one had a unique purpose. It was not only a demonstration of power, but also a deep lesson in spiritual training. This is interesting. Let's see where it goes. It was similar in kind to great signs performed in the Old Testament. For this reason, Jesus took only the disciples with him. When he performed miracles meant to show his divine power, he allowed others to witness them. But when he was preparing to face trials and stir fears, testing what it meant to follow him, he brought only those whom he was training to become spiritual champions, defenders of the gospel throughout the world. Interesting. So he had a select few of people where, obviously we know that, but he had this select few that he was training as if literally like this is my group, this is the group that's going to go and they are going to train others and they're going to make disciples of the entire world, and he is strengthening them. And as I was reading this, the image that came to mind is, you know, there's a lot of times there are things that could be misunderstood if not given to the right people. And so like maybe that entire crowd didn't need to see this, because if they saw it with everyone's difference in heart and demeanor and where they are in the healing process with Christ, they would have misunderstood and it would not have been good, which is why God didn't allow for everyone to see it. He kind of did this in private. He wanted just the 12 to be there. So St. John continues and he says, Matthew tells us that Jesus was asleep, and Luke adds that he was asleep on a pillow. This small detail points to Jesus' humility. It showed that he had no pride and was completely free of worldly luxuries. It also teaches us a powerful lesson about living simply and embracing hardships. Interesting. I really want to kind of meditate on that one for a second. Yeah, like, I don't know how relevant it is for that detail to be added, but he added it, which meant that it actually was there for a reason. That God allowed that particular detail to be a part of it. And if we really think about it, it's just he just had that pillow. That's it. To me, it just connects me with what was said earlier in the chapter of Matthew, chapter 8, where he talked about, birds have nests and foxes have dens, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head. This is what it reminded me of, is that he was so detached. He could have had everything we have, but none of that wealth actually matters in that sense. It matters only in as much as it would be used for the salvation of souls. But I don't know if it matters when compared to heaven. Like, if you compare it with real wealth, this is beautiful. It's amazing. We're so grateful for it. But it's also nothing compared to what is coming. It's a foreshadowing of what is coming. If we enjoy this much, imagine how much we're going to enjoy eternity. St. John continues and he says, Jesus was asleep during this intense storm, not because he was unaware of danger, but to allow his disciples to experience fear. This made their awareness of the situation sharper and their memories of what happened more vivid. Okay. Because of their heightened emotions. As a result of that, they were able to remember more. They were able to be sure of what is happening and to really grasp the theological concept that's just about to happen in a few seconds. To really, really, really intensely live out that fear so that there's no denial in their heart that this is God and this is what He's doing. He allowed the storm to come so that their experience of being rescued would be even more meaningful and their gratitude would be deeper and more lasting. Now, I really want to make it clear here that God is not trying to do this because He wants the glory for Himself, or He wants them to worship Him, or He wants them to experience these things so that they can come to Him and He can have, their gratitude. And for that, He could feel His value. God's value doesn't change whether you say thank you or not. What changes is you. You're the person that changes when you become a grateful person, when gratitude rules in your heart. And so, why would Christ allow them this? Because gratitude is so important. And being rescued is how we can know not to depend on ourselves, but to depend on Him. See, human logic says depend on yourself, build yourself up, and do all these things, and you will get to where you want to go and you will sustain yourself there. God's logic is different. He says, look, you don't know the wealth of resources I have, so you have to trust me. You have to make sure you're not worried about things. You have to say that if you're hungry, tell me. That's it. And have faith that whatever you ask will be given. And often I think we confuse this statement for, thinking, oh, we could literally ask for anything and God is at our orders kind of thing. But it's not what He's saying. He says, if you have faith or trust rather than just faith, then you really can ask for anything and it will be done for you. Because of the strength of trust that you give or that you have in Him. Do you trust that He's going to provide for today? Do you trust that if you say, come with me today, that He'll be with you? And no matter what happens, that's part of His plan and part of His will. So we continue with St. John, and he says, when the storm had grown strong and the sea became violent, the disciples ran to Jesus and cried out, Lord, save us, we're dying. But before He rebuked the sea, He first rebuked them. The storm was not random. It was allowed by God for their training. It was a preview of the trial and tribulations that they would face later in life. I want to stop at the part where he says, but He first rebuked them. And I think it's so important for us because there needs to be an examination of conscience. And if we're in communion with God or if you're talking to Him, then He will show you and He will tell you where you're doing that is wrong. He will rebuke you. And then once you have understood, He will silence the storms. Sometimes He silenced it before. But actually, what needs to change is you. I'm the one that needs to change as well, right? And this is obviously some things are a little bit different, but for the most part, it's my soul that needs to be healed. And I need to be rebuked by God because my pride is so great. And again, the storm was not random. God had planned it. In fact, after this event, they would encounter even worse storm, life-threatening troubles that would shake them to the very core. God allowed them to go through these storms so that they would grow in endurance. Endurance is very important. It's also a mark of faith with Christ. It's not that He just wants us to endure in the hard things so that we can get somewhere. It's actually that, do you trust that He knows what He's doing? Do you trust yourself not to rely on earthly logic? Because if so, endurance actually becomes quite a bit easier. Paul later described this kind of suffering when he said, we were burdened beyond measures, above strength, so that we despair even of life. But God delivered us from so great a death. This is 2 Corinthians 1-8 and verse 10. So he says, so what was Jesus teaching them here? That even when the waves rise and the dangers feels overwhelming, they should remain confident. Because He is in control of everything and allows a trial for their good. Sometimes we face trials, and if we're walking with Christ, the hope is that it was Him, that was His will. And then what happens today is His will, and what will happen tomorrow, should we continue to walk with Him, that is also His will. Now, what do we do when it's His will? We rejoice. Because that is the best thing that could happen to me. And the outcome of that day or that event or that moment is so incredibly precious that God is still in control, but He wants to give you these gifts. He wants to build your endurance. He wants you to be stronger and earn more rewards for heaven or contributes towards going to heaven. And He says, this is why He first corrects them. Even their fear serves a purpose. It made the miracle seem all the more powerful and unforgettable. He can use whatever you have, really. Whatever you give Him, He uses. You're afraid? Take a moment to just say, hey, I'm scared. Use it for your glory. You are angry, saying, I'm angry. Change it. Use it for your glory. And He will. And you'll see that it will be for a purpose. So when something unusual is about to happen, God often allows a sign and experiences that help us remember. That's His way of speaking it to us too. That's His way of solidifying it within us. Without this, we might witness a miracle and quickly forget. That's why the disciples had to feel genuine fear before their rescue, so that they would never forget what happened. This is similar to what happens with Moses. Before witnessing the miracles of the serpent turning into a staff, he was terrified by it and deeply disturbed. And then the miracle occurred. So too with the disciples. After believing that they were about to die, they were saved, so that they would first acknowledge the danger and then understand the greatness of the miracle. I feel like if we don't, or if God doesn't do this in this way, we don't really understand the value of what He's trying to give us. And the thing is, the majority of time, we still think that it is earthly value. Yes, a lot of times it accompanies earthly values, but the truth is, it's actually heavenly. And He's trying to lift us up. He's trying to shift our focus from what is earthly to what is divine. And so He allows these things. We're like, well, why would you allow something like this? But Jesus is actually doing this for our benefit, so that we would never forget what happened. And so He says, that's also why Jesus allowed Himself to sleep during the storm. If He had been awake, they wouldn't have been afraid. If God had answered you, if you had heard the voice of God, you would not have been afraid. And then St. John continues and he says, they wouldn't have thought to ask for help. And they might not have realized that He had the power to save them from such terrifying situations. Very important. One, He allowed Himself to sleep. He didn't need to sleep. I mean, he is fully human. But He allowed Himself in that instance for the sake of their salvation to sleep. Because if He did not sleep, they wouldn't realize the fact that He has so much power. He has all the power. And I think this happens with us all the time, is that we do not know the power that God has. We don't. So one, we don't ask for big things, which we should. And two, we don't realize that we can rely on Him in situations like this. And what is He doing? He's like, okay, while I'm with you, let me train you that when these situations do come about, you know to run to me. And you know that I'm here. And you know that your faith needs to be deeper and better. Imagine Him rebuking them while there's still a storm. It's like He hasn't even calmed the storm. And He's like, actually, what I need you to do is I need you to be reformed by this. I don't need this to just go by. I need you to be reformed by this. So next time there's a storm that happens, you run to me, but you're not freaking out. You run to me because you trust that I have the power to stop it, and I will always do the best thing for you. That's essentially what it is. St. John continues and he says, people don't perceive things the same way when they happen to others as they do when it happens to themselves. This could not be more truth. In Arabic, we say everyone learns from their own bag, or rather, everyone learns from their own mistakes, right? Of course, we learn from one another, but the truth is, oftentimes it's our own experience that teaches us the most. So it says, up to this point, the disciples had seen others being healed and blessed, but they hadn't experienced a personal deliverance. And it's something very important to experience as well. They were not blind or paralyzed. They had no personal need like those Jesus had already helped, right? That wasn't the case. It wasn't that they needed to be healed in that way. And I think the majority of us, we read the stories in the Bible and we think, oh, that's just healing for people who are sick. Or maybe even think that doesn't happen anymore because it hasn't happened to you. But Jesus is saying, hey, actually, I'm saving you from other things. You still need healing. You need to experience my love. And unless we open our hearts to Him, then we will not experience His love. We really would not experience it at all. So we continue. And He says that they were not blind, but it was important that they too experience personal deliverance, so that He allowed the storms to come, not to harm them, but so that through their rescue, they could fully appreciate the power of God and carry that memory into the future. What a beautiful thing to say. And now St. John continues. It says, this is in regards to Matthew 8:26, where he says, why are you fearful, you of little faith, right? So he says, he stood up, he rebuked them, and he says this to them. And St. John's telling us, actually, this is cool because Jesus did not correct their little faith in the presence of the crowd. Instead, he waited until he was alone with his disciples to rebuke him so that they wouldn't be publicly ashamed. I cannot preface this enough. God does this for us. He does this for us all the time. He allows certain things that we think, oh, like it's just, he lets it slide. But he's not really letting it slide. He wants to talk to you in private. And in the privacy of your heart, he then begins to show you that these are the things that you have messed up on, or these are the things that need to be fixed. This is where your faith is lacking. And he does that in private to protect us so that we're not shamed. Because this is the kind of God he is. He's so incredibly loving and he's so incredibly generous and gentle. And he says, before calming the storm on the sea, he first calmed the storms in their heart. He said, why are you so afraid, O you of little faith? In this way, he taught them that human fear doesn't arise merely from the presence of danger, but from the weakness of the human mind. Wow, mind blown. Mind blown right there. It is as a result of the weakness of the mind. That's where fear comes from. It doesn't come from the presence of danger. It comes from our thoughts. And this is where the whole concept of holding each thought captive is so incredibly important. And what we choose to listen to invites more of these thoughts. It could actually invite more of healing, or it could invite more of worry and anxiety and all that. And he continues and he says, now, if someone were to say that it wasn't fear or weak faith of the disciples to come to Jesus and wake him, I would answer, and this is, of course, not me answering to St. John. He says, I would answer this. That very act, waking him up, was a clear sign that they did not yet have a proper understanding of who he was. Interesting. They believed he could command the sea if he were awake. But they had not yet grasped that he had the same power while he is asleep. Do we know? Do you know? Do I know? These are such deep questions. That do I know who he is? Yes, I say it with my words. Yes, I proclaim it every Sunday, or I proclaim it every time I pray the Apostles' Creed or the Nicene Creed. Yes, 1000%. But do I really know who he is and that he has these powers, even when he is not physically present with me? And should this surprise you, St. John asks, consider that even after seeing many miracles, their understanding of him was still imperfect. That's us. That's why he frequently corrected them, as when he said, "Are you still without understanding?" in Matthew 15:16. So, if the disciples, who were so close to him, still had an unclear view of his divine nature, it would not be surprising that the crowd had an even lower opinion of him. Wow, yes, that's us and the rest of the world, and people who are just coming into faith and just barely learning. Where's the same question? Does it surprise us? If I myself still have my doubts, still have my fears, still have my all of the things that I have that require his healing, that require me to be humble for me to understand them and for me to be healed from them, then what about all the other people who don't necessarily know him, who haven't seen a lot of his miracles? Um, so St. John continues and he says, "But they had already seen others receive Christ's mercy. But no one can feel the power or the full power of God's goodness as deeply as one experienced personally. That's why Jesus allowed the storm to arise, so that through their own deliverance, they would come to a deeper, more personal awareness of his goodness. Now, this storm is symbolized as the spiritual storms that they would one day face. So incredibly important for us as well. Spiritual battles, not just physical. He's talking about spiritual storms. As Paul writes, "I do not want you to be unaware, brothers and sisters, that we were burdened excessively beyond our strength, so that we despair even of life." There's a lot of spiritual stuff that's happening in this case. It's him, it's his movement. And as a result of that, as a result of us growing with him, there will come a time where there are storms out there. And you may think, okay, surely you just want to go back to living with this person and praying these prayers. And God's like, actually, what I need you to do is I need you to shift over and I want you to talk to this. So we continue with St. John, and he says, take note. The storm did not just slow down or lessen. It stopped immediately. Everything became perfectly calm, without the trace of disturbance left behind. This is the same thing that happened in Fatima, by the way, with the miracle of the sun. So he says, this was supernatural. In nature, even when a storm ends, the sea usually remains choppy for some time. But here, the moment Jesus spoke, complete peace followed. Same thing in our lives. Same thing in our lives. Yes, you may have some things that you need to clean up, or some things that you need to change, or some things that need to happen within you or outside of you as well. But once he gives his words, when he says his words, there is peace. And this fulfillment was foretold in the Psalms. He says, he spoke and the stormy wind ceased. Jesus fulfilled this in reality with just his word, his commandment of the sea and the wind, and they obeyed. For his appearance, he's sleeping. His use of the boat. Those present assumed that he was only a man. But once they saw him command the sea with a word, they were filled with wonder and said that this is, who is this man? That even the wind obey him, right? This is what we have. Now, Christ, sometimes we proclaim and say that we know that this is God, he is God. But do we know what that means? Do we know what that looks like? And without him, we won't be able to. All right, my friends, that is it for today. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you have any questions, please reach out to me at The Word with Rita, and I will be with you in the next episode. Bye for now.